Hi folks, Steve here. Let's talk Born Into Brothels. This was a documentary sort of co-directed by Ross Kaufman and Zaina Brisky. Zaina Brisky will appear across the film as sort of the star of the film. So it's one of those performative director as star movies, and she's very prevalent. The interesting thing about the film is, although it's not her story in a way, it's the story of the children, and this poster would suggest that. She kind of makes it her story by her own intervention into this world, into the children, and sort of these external things that she in the film claims that she does through her own presence, which raises some questions, not so much about her intentions, but whether those intentions are actually real and have any merit. There's a lot of questions around this film, and is this sort of a film like like Catching the Freedmans or Eileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, where the filmmakers sort of come in and want to persuade you of a certain thing, but then when the film's over, they have very little really to do with the subject that they're actually depicting. Anyway, we can get talking about that across this lecture. So, the film is really based on performative conventions, like I said, and I really want you to think about that. I will talk a bit more specifically about those performative conventions, but the main thing I want you to really think about when you're watching the film is the audience asked to reflect critically on the process of which it persuades us of truth. Now, what I mean by that is the film is saying that here is a world, this world really exists, and this is truthful. And it wants to persuade us of particular things, which is these children are being exploited, these children aren't given any really positive hope in their own lives. The parents are quite ruthless, brutal, cruel towards their children, right? It wants us to persuade us of all of those things. But it kind of tells us those things. It kind of tells us this is how you should think about these things. It doesn't ask us to really reflect and question and challenge those things, right? So it is different to something like, A Catching the Freedmans or A Thin Blue Line, those films where they're actually putting up information or facts and giving you a whole different range of contrasts around that too, and you kind of walk away confused, but therefore willing to actually come up with your own critical view. It's not that sort of film, right? The interesting thing about the film is how it shoots the children kind of at play, at work, just living, right? And all of the characters ignore the camera, right? But the camera's there. It's clearly there, right? But they're acting like the camera isn't there. So you've kind of got to think about, well, it's doing that to show them in a very sort of natural setting, but the fact that they're ignoring the camera makes what they're actually doing very unnatural and very contrived, right? So think about that. Think about when you're actually ignoring the camera, how you're becoming more conscious of the camera's presence than had you just sort of spoken directly to the camera. The most famous example of that is the Bob Dylan film Don't Look Now, which very much plays around with that. Now, why use this technique when the film does also use interviews with the social actors? And that's the interesting thing about the film. So in some scenes, you've got the characters completely ignoring the camera. Then in other scenes, right, you've got them actually interacting with the camera, which again is kind of really interesting in the way the film sort of is trying to set up these ideas of truth and different sort of representations of truth. Now, how is Brisky, that Zaina Brisky, referred to by some of the children as Aunt Zaina, how is she represented as the knowing expert, right? So she comes as this sort of the Western knowing expert. She clearly has a translator with her at all times, but we don't see the translator, right? There's nothing that the film does which would undermine her as the knowing expert. And think about that. Think about why the translator isn't there and what impact it would have if the translator was actually present on the camera and if the translator was actually there translating things for Zaina, right? Why doesn't the film comment on the issues of translation, right? There are numerous issues of translation across this film. Translation in the language, translation in the social climate and context, which the film never, ever goes to understand. It's not about the filmmakers trying to make sense of this world, right? It's actually about the filmmakers knowing this world and almost trying to expose this world, right? The film never talks about the issues of making this film, right? Here you've got these filmmakers going into a foreign place and space, and they're having to make a film, they're having to make sense of everything that's happening, right? But you never actually see them talking about that. Another example would be Forbidden Lies, a film like that, where you've actually got the filmmaker constantly sort of saying, I don't really know what's going on in this film anymore. I don't know how to make this film. Really questioning the whole process of filmmaking. That doesn't actually appear in the film, and it's worth us asking why not. Now, social actors and money is always an issue. It's an ongoing issue. A number of social actors have tried to sue their films who haven't paid them. Now, because we're looking at children here, and because the issue of exploitation comes up, well, it comes up by the film, because the film is actually saying these kids are being exploited, and then by making a documentary about them, the filmmakers, of course, could be accused of exploitation. So what they declared to do, they being Kaufman and Brisky, is return the film's profits back into the community of Calcutta, right? Now, this was to ensure that they themselves weren't accused of exploitation, and it allows the film to be seen for tapping into wider issues beyond just the story of the social actors depicted, right? So it's not like, here are some social actors and we will pay them and that's it. They're actually saying, well, it's actually about the broader issues of the social actors. So in regard to those broader issues and those broader contexts, we're actually going to funnel some money into help. Now, the question is that that's fine to do it, but these two filmmakers had great resources and avenues for further funding, further campaigning, which they didn't actually do. And you could actually say that this film helped very much to begin a sort of career avenue for them through this sort of the social activist filmmakers. And what was their decision to put the film's profits back into the community? Really, one, just to safeguard them from any accusations of exploitation, or is it an interesting way of thinking about the social actors and payment? Now, in regard to the social actors, how are they depicted within and outside the film, right? Now, Asian critics at the time of the film's release, they said the kids of Calcutta were depicted as others, right? They were constantly being depicted as others. They were never being... The film sort of takes this almost patronising view of them as the other kids from the other place, right? The filmmakers never actually go to understand them as human beings. Also, many of the critics made out. The the question, therefore, really is, so whom is the film for? Who is this film actually made for? And the Asian critics were very quick to say, well, the film is not made for India. Well, it wasn't even released in India. I'll talk about that in a sec. It's not made for Asian critics. It's not made for anybody apart from affluent Western white people who want to feel great about themselves, that here are some affluent white Westerners coming in to kind of save these kids from their inevitable fate. And a number of certainly Asian critics, but also Western critics, have had some issues with that. Now, in the question of who is the film for, the film was not released in India, right? This is a decision the filmmakers took, that they didn't even try to get the film released in India. They said, we're not going to release the film in India, right? Now, what does this suggest about the representation of Calcutta and of India, right? Perhaps that this representation is actually very negative and would actually be very hurtful for the people from this community who don't actually agree with a lot of the representations that are being depicted on the screen. So think about that, why the film would not be released in India, and what this suggests about the representation of this community and India more generally. Now, bad parents are across this film. Now, there are scenes of parents referring to their children in the film as brats and demanding that the children are making money to earn their keep, right? Now, for a Western audience, right, such parents seem harsh, they seem nasty, they seem like bad parents, right? And then you've got the filmmaker photographer, Zaina Brisky, referred to as Auntie Zaina. She's like the good adult. She's the savior, right? She's like the good angel in the Wizard of Oz, right? And she sort of could have come to save the day and to rescue the children, but the problem with the film is it doesn't actually look at the broader social issues. Why would the parents need their children to be making money, right? It's not because of the greedy parents as much of the social, the political, the economic situation that these communities and these families find themselves in. These people are marinated in poverty, right? They cannot escape the poverty that they live in. The reason why, when someone says, parents all they're obsessed with is money, is because they don't have any and they kind of need it to survive, right? So it takes this other form. But the film never tries to make sense of that, right? So think about that. Why doesn't the film take into account the issues of poverty, right? Or the translation languages they speak? Because a lot of the parents, the way they refer to their children, right, the way it's been translated is very harsh, but is that a true translation, right, of actually what they're saying? Does the film really give a holistic view of Calcutta? Which means does it really go to lengths to actually give you a sense of this place and this space? Why doesn't the film reference the political activism done by the sex workers themselves? This is the thing. The sex workers themselves, certainly the ones with children, they have a lot of issues for their situation as well, and they've been doing political activism. But the film doesn't go to address that and actually give those activists their due. It's as if everyone's complacent, everyone's happy with this situation, all right? And Auntie Zaina is here to save the day. Okay, what evidence is there that the filmmakers wanted to assist and work with the parents? And you see, that's another problem. It's like the parents are represented as the bad parents, and then you've got Auntie Zaina coming in, right? Now, if these parents are bad, then why didn't the filmmakers educate them on accessible childcare resources in the community? The filmmakers had great access and they had great knowledge and they'd been doing great research. They knew all of the available options that the parents had to give them assistance. But there's no scenes of the filmmakers actually sitting the parents down and saying, these are the resources that you can use that you're not using because you don't know about them. The film doesn't do that. The film just says, bad parents, we're going to save the kids. And I think that's ethically, it does raise a number of problems. Now, the film claims that what we're seeing is the world through the children's eyes. How does the film invite us to read the children's photographs as a window into their lives? So think about that, right? Now, it is interesting, looking at the photographs that the children take, and some of them are really beautiful photographs, and they're worthy of celebration. But just think about one important thing. A lot of the photographs that the children are taken during the day, so they can use natural lighting, and things seem a lot kinder in the photographs compared to the grainy night scenes of the film crew, right, where everything looks kind of bleak and dark and grim, right? Brisky is clearly involved in what the children shoot and how. Now, this doesn't come across in the film either, but she was very much involved in the framing, the way they were framing, the composition, and also the photos that appear in the film, she selected herself. The photos that she took for the Amnesty International calendar, she selected herself. So there is a lot of editing going on in that, and there's a lot of assistance that she was giving the children. So it's worth to think about that also in the depiction of the film, and the way that truth is actually being conveyed here. Expository conventions of the film. Think about the voiceover, how it addresses the audience directly, how the voiceover is an attempt to persuade the audience of a particular point of view, right? You will come out of this film thinking a certain way, and that's because of the expository conventions which are there across the film. Observational conventions are also there. Like I said, there are scenes when we're just observing people at work. The handheld cameras is used for that effect. There's no voiceover in these scenes, well, not many. There's no interviews in these scenes. And it's very much just showing the world that we're depicting. Participatory or interactive conventions there as well, where the documentary maker in Auntie Zaina, is interacting with the subjects, with the social actors. She's interviewing them. There are interviews that we see across the film as well, and of course the performative conventions. And think about that. Think about Auntie Zaina as a star, as a subject of a social actor herself. Think about other documentaries you may have seen where you've got the filmmaker as the star, like Forbidden Lies, or your Nick Broomfields, or your Michael Moores, where they're very much involved in the story that they're telling and the subjects that they're actually depicting. And it's really interesting, and I'll be interested to know what you actually think about Zaina Brisky, and whether she is a convincing narrator and sort of star or not. And just a final thought, how or what does the film want to persuade you of? Is it successful in this? The film claims to be the world through the children's eyes, as the poster that you saw at the start of this lecture would suggest, where you've just got an image of the children. But what's interesting about that, it's not the world through the children's eyes, it's an image of the children, right? And it's almost, the argument is that the film is constructing an image of the children, not watching the world through the children's eyes, right? But this world through the children's eyes, how does the film attempt to do this? Is the audience asked to reflect critically on the process of which it persuades us of truth? And is that a problem that you have? You may think that it actually does ask us. I'll be interested to know what you think about that. How are the social actors depicted with and outside the film? All right, so think about the depiction of the kids, of the mothers, of the sex workers, also very much of Zaina and how she's represented across it. And finally, how is Brisky represented as the knowing expert, right? And how she is constantly sort of the saviour for this community. Okay, so let's leave it there. This is an Academy Award winning film. extremely popular, extremely persuasive, and a lot of people have really been quite moved by this film. And in a lot of parts, it is quite moving, but I think the construction of it, there is some questions to be asked about the actual truth of the way that things are being depicted, and is the film as genuine as the filmmakers would want you to believe? All right, I'll leave that question there. Look forward to watching it with you and speak to you then. Bye for now.